All right, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are to watch this webinar. It's a transatlantic webinar for supervisor based on PhD career development. That's what we are going to be talking about today. This webinar takes place in a series of webinars aimed for PhD supervisors by ad hoc métis. You can find our other webinars on our YouTube channel, but I warn you, the other webinars are in French, and I'm not gonna be talking much longer. I'll let our speakers for today from ad hoc talent management talk right now. The stage is yours, people.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you at our webinar to talk about PhD career development across the Atlantic for supervisors. My name is Rebecca Mayman. I am a research officer and recruitment consultant for ad hoc talent management in the Montreal office in Canada. And just before I tell us a little bit about ad hoc, perhaps I should maybe introduce the rest of our team, and then we can move on. So maybe we can introduce the rest of our team starting from France and then move on to Belgium.
All right, so start with me. My name is Anis Amakran. I am also a research officer at Doctoral Talent Management in Paris, well, in France. I also am a consultant trainer at the company, and I will be here talking about the competencies of the PhDs and why it is important for them to know what are their added value and their skills that they would promote in the future. Laurence.
Okay. Yes, my name is Laurence Denis. I'm in around Brussels, and I am developing the Belgian office of ad hoc talent management since a year now. And exactly, I'm a recruiter consultant and a trainer consultant. So as Anis explained, I provide some training for PhDs, postdocs, and researchers in university in Belgium. And I try also to help companies to find the best profile for their recruitment. Okay.
Thank you so much. So just briefly before we get into to the content of what we have today, I'll tell you a little bit about ad hoc talent management. So we're the first career management firm for PhDs and research personnel. And we have three main activities, which are recruitment, training, and research and development. So we really do have a unique position in the PhD talent pool based on a hybrid team of PhDs and human resources professionals. And we do have innovative methodologies developed by the team, a strong anchoring in skills, and a role to play between PhDs and recruiters. So we have around 16 employees in 4 cities, Paris, Brussels, Strasbourg, and Montreal. And as Simon kindly introduced us earlier, that we are an associated firm with ad hoc métis, which specializes in human resource management and doctorate policy for higher education and research in Strasbourg. Here, we just wanted to give you an idea of some of the institutions and the clients that we work with. So this is not everyone that we work with, but these are some of our more recent or more of our more regular clients and institutions that we work with. So you'll see universities and institutions across Canada, France, and Belgium as well. So to get started, I'd like to just talk for a moment about the importance of the career plan for PhDs. And the way that we look at a career plan in our career development practices is to first, we function on 3 spheres. So first we ask PhDs to identify their preferences, motivations, aspirations, to be able to determine which jobs that they want. And then we ask them to look at their skills and personal qualities to determine where that they can go. And the idea here is that those 2 spheres working at the same time with the expectations of the labor market is where we can find the range of possibilities for a personal and realistic career plan. So we have to think about what we can do, what we want to do, and what are the real needs of the job market to have that plan. And the 3 spheres of our career plan, just a little bit more in depth. When we look at aspirations and motivations, we ask PhDs to consider their values, models, their intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, things like comfort zones, operating mode, their achievement, and other things such as goals. And moving our focus onto skills, we ask them to kind of look at their path. What training and experience do they have? What professional or extracurricular activities do they have that can contribute to those skills, as well as their strengths and differentiating assets, and to consider the transferability of these skills. And then lastly, again, that realistic career plan comes in the expectations of the job market. Thanks. So let's take a look at the job market. But first, looking at the career plan, we have just a little bit of data from one of our studies that we have done in France in 2017, and we asked PhDs if they had a well-defined career plan at the time of their defense. And we found that 74% of PhDs did have a well-defined career plan at the time of defense. But for that 26% who did not, we find that really having the career plan helps with their career satisfaction. So we find higher career satisfaction and higher job alignment with the career plan for those PhDs who 5 years later were employed. So what this tells us is that having the career plan is important. Now, what are those careers? What do they look like? Well, here we'll give you a few insights about the labor market for PhDs in France, Canada, and Belgium. So when looking at sectors of activity, I have a little bit of data here from France and from Canada. And although the numbers are slightly different, the trends are similar. We see around 40 to 50% working in research and academia, around between 20 and 12% working in R&D in private institutions. And then we have 27% in France and 37% in Canada of PhDs who are working outside of research and development roles. So academia is not the only outcome for PhDs. When we look now at the sectors of activities that PhDs work in, these numbers come from studies that we have done in Canada and in France on PhD employability. And we find that in Canada, we have about 34. So what we're looking at here is the type of position. And what we see in blue are permanent positions, before I'll tell you the numbers. So when we're looking at is 34% of PhDs that we found in our research study last year in Canada were working in permanent positions in university. When we move into the public sector, we find more permanent positions at close to 60%. And in the private, we have the highest number of permanent positions as compared to short-term or postdoctoral positions at 92%. And this looks similar in France, although the structure is different because universities are part of the public sector. So here we do see that in France, although we have a good number of permanent positions in the university and public sector at 67%, it's much higher in the private sector. Here we have just a few numbers of researchers in companies. So this is really interesting to see the upward trend of researchers working in companies across countries. I see a little bit of a dip here in Canada, no doubt due to a 2008 recession in North America, but otherwise we see that over the years that we have more and more research positions in companies. And to the right, we have some data just specific to France as far as economical branch goes. So we have a lot of industry research positions that are available for PhDs. So what types of jobs do PhDs work in these different sectors? Here we have some of our data from Canada and France, and we find that PhDs work in a number of different roles. Largely teaching and research, I see across both countries, but PhDs also are employed in roles including consulting, production, support, health services, communication, marketing, executive management, and these are just a few examples of trends that we find across these two countries. And in our next slide, we'll take a look at what those roles look like in France between the public and the private sector. So again, a large number of teaching and higher education degrees in the public sector, but we also have specialized scientific and technical roles, as well as human health and social action roles. And when we look over into the private sector, we see a number of different roles in IT, in different types of services, as well as administration and public service activities, finance, insurance. So overall, we see, looking, even across the Atlantic, that PhDs have a number of different roles that they play, even between public and private sectors. For those of us who are interested in our Belgium activities, just looking at some of what that looks like in Belgium, here we see that, again, we have a large number of PhDs working in university, but there are a number of PhDs who are also working in industry, in service industries, education, higher education outside of the university, and government and public roles, as well as nonprofit and research institutes. So all that to say, we just wanted to give you a few ideas of what the numbers look like to kind of show you that PhDs are more than just researchers. And we do find that when we study their employment outcomes, that they wind up in a number of sectors and different types of organizations and a number of different roles, and using the skills that they have. And at this point, I'll invite Anis to talk to us about what those skills and competencies are.
I was muted. Thank you very much, Rebecca. So exactly as you said, I will bounce on what you said really at the beginning. I'm talking about the three spheres. Remember that the first sphere was talking about the competencies and the skills of the PhDs. Now, we all know that PhDs develop a lot of skills, a lot of competencies. It's completely clear for everyone. However, is it clear for them that they do have them? Do they know what kind of vocabulary are they using? This is actually where the management actually plays a role of these candidates, or helping them, or the training actually in order to teach them or to make them understand what are the skills that they are developing. And in order for them to know these kind of skills, they have to get in touch with them. They have to understand actually what are the activities that they are doing in order to make these competencies at work. Now, as Rebecca said, the outcome of PhDs is not only academic, and I'm pretty sure that you all are aware of that. In a couple of decades ago, maybe not just maybe decades ago, only PhDs were only made to become researchers, to become teachers at the university. But today we're done actually to create more and more, to provide more and more PhDs. If I'm not wrong, in France we should reach 19,000. We were supposed actually to reach 19,000 new PhDs per year in Horizon 2020, but it didn't happen because of the different problems that we had the last decade. But we are wishing actually to reach that 19,000 new PhDs per year in 2023. However, on the other side, we are providing already now 15,000 new PhDs per year. And for these 15,000 new PhDs per year, you clearly guess that not all of them will orient directly to academia. So we have to take care of all the people, all the PhDs who want to leave academia, for example. Academia is like interested in multiple competencies, but since we all know exactly what is a PhD, they just ask for a scientific expertise and technical expertise. However, when you leave this sector, people are asking for different kind of expertise. So we know that a PhD has a scientific expertise. We know that they have technical expertise. So basically, we're not going to tell them, we're not going to ask them actually how they do their job, because they are the experts of the word in this topic. We are more interested in the other competencies. The trend today for the recruitment is more oriented towards transversal competencies, the social skills, and the aptitudes and qualities over the scientific expertise, the meta competencies, and the technical and transferable competencies. This is why it's very important for them to understand what they are developing. Here in this slide, I'm showing you the result of a poll that we made available for while in a couple of years ago. It's what we call the core competencies of PhDs, which actually means that these are the competencies that are developed by all the PhDs independently from their gender, independently from their field of research, from the time actually spent since they defended their thesis. So basically, it's the skills that they might develop completely out of the dependence actually of their profile. And what we do is that we help them to understand this kind of competencies. I'm pretty sure that for the majority of them, they already have these competencies. So what we do is that we have to help them in order to understand them. So basically, they have to know what kind of competency they're developing, how they are developing it, and when they should use it. So what kind of environment do they have to use it only in academia? Are they able actually to transfer it outside of academia? So these are the ingredients, actually the main ingredients for our doctors that need actually to be shown up front to the different sectors, like outside of academia. So basically recruiters and so on. The sad actually news is that PhDs are clearly not aware right away that they are developing these competencies. So what we did for this slide about the competencies, we acquired a lot of expressions, and then we had to analyze them and then to come up with the different core of competencies. But then what we did is that we followed a group of PhDs who defended their thesis in 2012. And then we asked them 1 year after the defense, so basically in 2013. And then we asked them 3 and 5 years. Here I'm showing just 1 and 5 years after the defense. It's the same PhDs coming from the same, like not all coming from the same school, but it's exactly the same PhDs that we asked 1 year and after 5 years about their competencies. And what we see is that for the majority actually of the competencies, they kind of figure out quite late that they are developing these competencies. Take, for example, cognitive competencies. The first year after the PhD, they say that the 62% of the PhD said that it was an added value, whereas 5 years after the defense, it was 73%. The major step actually, or the major bounce that we saw was in the perseverance, for example, where it went from 21% to 56%. So basically here is the list of the 10 or 11, if I'm not wrong, I don't can count so fast, but it's the main competencies that are that represent an added value for PhDs. And the question was a competency that you developed during the PhD. So this is why it's clearly important for the PhDs to understand and to know their competencies right when they are doing the PhD, instead of waiting 5 years later. Because waiting 5 years later, waiting like year 2, 3, 4, 5 years after the defense will push them actually to be unemployed, will push them to be unhappy at their work, will push them to do multiple postdocs instead of finding a permanent position because they want to have a permanent position, and so on. So it will just knowing actually it's not knowing yourself, but knowing your competencies, your ability or your appetences into doing a specific task will allow you clearly to be very to have like a big weight at the labor market. So for different competencies, that's actually what we really specialize in at ADOC. We really work on the competencies of PhD. So we do a lot of surveys. We interrogate a lot of PhDs from different sectors, from different regions. Here I'm showing you the list of the competencies that are cited by the PhDs all over France and Canada. And what we see is that actually both countries, people actually tend to think that France is different from Canada, Canada different from Belgium, Belgium different from any other country. Actually, it's not. All the PhDs are, I don't want to say actually same but different, but same. But however, they're still, actually we are still in the same pool. We are still doing research, looking at fundamental science. And this is actually what pushes them to develop the competencies like methodology, analytical capacity, in-depth thinking, independence, scientific and technical skills, planning and time management, creativity, capacity of adaptation, and so on. So all these skills are the skills that are now developed by the PhDs. And the good news is that over time, we see that these PhDs are more and more aware of these competencies. So if I compare the data from 2012 and the data from 2019, we clearly see that the 10 actually right now of PhDs is to understand what are their competencies. So they tend now to talk about project management. They tend also to talk about the time management of collaboration, networking, and so on. So it's going on the right way. However, it's still too far actually from being perfect. And since I like perfection, I kind of try to push them into knowing literally all the competencies. So this is why training the PhDs and accompanying them and helping them into figuring it out will help them a lot in discovering all their competency and put all their skills at work for the labor market. To push more over this aspect of competencies and why it's necessary for them to understand them, the skills that are valued by PhDs, right, after they finish the thesis, obviously, but at their first job, I mean, is for 61% of them scientific and technical skills, which actually means that 39% of PhDs didn't cite scientific and technical skills didn't value the scientific and technical skills that much for their job. So basically, again, as I told you, this is one aspect of the competencies that the PhDs are doing, but also what the recruiters are looking for. So we clearly know that you have the scientific and technical expertise, where what we are going to ask you about is all the others, so cognitive abilities, complex problem management and solving, persistence, autonomy, rigor, communication, English, project management, scientific watch. So all these competencies has to be valued by the PhDs. And I'm sorry to tell you, it's not something that can come up right away. So you have to train to that. You have to prepare yourself. You have to do your homework somehow in order for you as a PhD candidate to be aware of this competency and to use the right, obviously, to use the right vocabulary. Now also actually that the labor market is looking for competencies, but you know that it's always evolving. So the competencies 10 years ago are different from the competencies that we're looking for today, and they will be different also 20 years from now. So from the World Economic Forum, they publish every year a report about the trend of recruitment and what we are looking for as competencies. And what they say is that what we are looking for in the 21st century is the foundation of literacies, the competencies, and the character qualities. So basically everything that a PhD has: literacy, numeracy, scientific literacy, ICT literacy, financial, cultural one. Then you have critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. And then you also have curiosity, initiative, persistence, and so on. So basically, these are the competencies that we are looking for and we will be looking for in the next couple of years. And this is why a PhD actually really needs to understand them in order to, I don't like to use the term sell them, but there is, so far as I know, nothing that no other word actually that I could use. So they have to sell their profile, and they have to show the interlocutor that they have developed all these competencies during their PhD. Also, we see that, like, to enhance the fact that the evolution of the economic sector is evolving and evolving, Sorry, that was fast. We see actually that the trend of the recruitment, the trend actually of needed skills are towards mathematical skills and social skills. So basically what you see here is the difference between share of job fill and share of job that grow. So basically, what are the jobs that are dying, the jobs actually that will rise in the future or are rising right now, and those actually who kind of remain the same. And what we see is that all of these jobs, like the red ones, are going to disappear at some point in the future. Whereas actually on the other side, the green ones or the blue-green ones are the ones actually that are rising. So basically, we are looking for more and more financial engineers, computer scientists, accountants, management analysts, physicians, and so on. So basically, this is why knowing actually, developing the scientific skills is not enough. So you have also to develop the social skills. You have also to develop the technical and transferable competencies and skills for your profile. If we compare the skills actually demand in 2018, so try to be factual between 2018 and what we are clearly looking for in 2022, we see actually that in 2018 we have the analytical thinking and innovation, but still in 2022 we will also be looking for analytical thinking and innovation. And you have here the list of all the competencies that we were looking for at 2018, and the ones actually that we are expecting in 2022, but which also shows the competencies that we are not really looking for in the future. For example, manual dexterity, endurance and precision, reading, writing, math and active listening, management of financial material resources, memory, verbal, auditory and spatial abilities, quality control and safety awareness, and visual, auditory and speech abilities, which basically means that we have always to be aware of the need of the requirements of competencies today and try to be the scientist of looking forward. So basically don't stop in 2020 right now, try to see what will happen in 5 years, try to see what we will need in 10 years. In order to understand what are the trends and what are the skills actually that you need to develop in order to be performant for the society. I just really need to remind you that to keep in mind clearly that a PhD is not anymore an academic, are not only anymore anyway academic professionals, and PhDs doesn't mean researchers. So you have researchers that are not PhDs, you have PhDs that are not researchers, as well as you have PhDs that are academic professionals and so on. And the other way around, you have also academic professionals that are not PhDs. So clearly try to focus on that when you work with your PhD candidates, because it's clearly important not only for you, also for them, but also for society to produce these kind of talented skills in order to enrich actually our society with talents. Now I let my colleague Laurence from Belgium talk a little bit about the action that you need to do in order to perform these activities and to make them more sensitive towards this action. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anis. And exactly based on what Anis and Rebecca just said, I would like to share now with you some tips and tricks to help your PhD candidates on the question regarding their career development. As we just seen, the job options are really various and numerous. The question to help your PhD is to help them to answer to which ones will match best their profiles, so I mean your PhD candidates. Because you know now that the range of possibilities is much wider probably than you imagined before. So you have to help them to stay curious and gather information to define what will be the next job. So they need to use some time to think about it and to get outside of academia. Yes. Okay, so yeah, you can go further. Yeah, thank you. So clearly, about the skills, I think you can do to help is clearly to help them analyze their successes and failures, so they can extract their strengths, their areas for improvement, their skills, all and to define how what kind of feedback they can learn from all that experience. To be aware of the skills and the progression is also a clear motivation driver. So if you can do this exercise all along the process of the PhD to show them what they learn, what are the progress they made, is something to help them to keep being motivated all along the process, because you know well that the PhD is not easy all the time, and we have variation between the motivation. So it's something you can do for that aspect. Another thing is maybe you can also adapt the autonomy on the project management to to allow your candidates to grow. It means that an evolutive management role is also something you can think about to help at the beginning more than some months after, and to evaluate each time on what aspects they need more help and on what aspects they gain autonomy. So you have to challenge them sometimes, but not to let them alone all the time. So it's a balance to find and to adapt all along the process of the PhD. And what about to have a partial adaptation of the project regarding the career goal of your PhD candidates? If you have that discussion at different moments of the PhD or the advancement of the PhD, you can identify and listen about what the goal of your PhDs are, and according these choices, maybe you can adapt a little bit some aspect of the project in terms of kind of collaboration, the possibility of different kind of conferences or going to events that connect more partner and representative of institution and private sector, for example, etc. So maybe you can be open-minded on the proposal they can make also on that aspect. Okay, next one. Okay, another aspect very important is that if we look at that graph, it's a representation of the percentage of the channel or the way different PhD candidates find their first job after the defense. And what we can observe is that the network is clearly a key way to find a job, but we can just cut it further, and we can see that the network developed during the PhD is clearly the most important circle where freshly PhD graduates can find opportunities. This is strongly linked to you, supervisors, because clearly their network depends also on yours. So try to open yours, your network to your PhD candidates. What can we see on this graph? It's also that people for PhDs find a job through competition for the public position, through websites of different companies, by spontaneous application also, direct contact from employer that are searching for specific experts. So sometimes employer finds directly the PhDs. Also the professional social network, like has LinkedIn, for example, is clearly one of the best tool you can suggest to your PhD to develop a profile on that website. Clearly, ResearchGate is also a network used by some employers. Yeah, and the forum events, the PhD career fair, for example, we organize in each country. We have there is one in around September in Paris, in December in Belgium, and I don't know when in Canada, but maybe Rebecca can give the information just after. But be open to that different event and publish or spread it to your network in your labs. The idea is clearly to put yourself, your team, and your PhD candidates in a virtuous circle of success. The idea is that both successes are strongly linked. So if you help them to have a positive vision of their career goal and career path planning, they clearly can impact the motivation all along the process, and keeping an eye on what they want to do after, give them a role and an importance, and not only as a labor that pass to for a moment in the labs. They are people on which you are betting for the future. So they help to make something advanced. And it's also a way to keep contact and good contact with all the candidates and researchers that comes from your lab, because they can also talk about your labs outside of the university, outside of the lab. And candidates talk a lot, so clearly it's to open and maximize, increase the visibility of your labs and the attractiveness of your research and the way you manage your researcher. Okay, so to conclude, before other question maybe, or other added information from my colleague, the take-home message we will give you today was clearly to anticipate and help your PhD to anticipate the next step of their career. Keep your eyes open to the evolution of the labor market. As Anis and Rebecca showed, things move very fast. So to have updated information to share it with your team is clearly a very good and an important tip. The second one is clearly to consider the doctoral training not only as a researcher for academic world, but has a unique and inspiring experience. Is clearly the unique opportunity to develop specific and very high and talented skills that will be valuable in different kind of sector and institution and companies. And it's also professional experience has a short term, and we encourage every PhD candidate to use that term in the CV as a early stage researcher and not only a PhD student. It's better to position themselves as researcher. And to consider also that the doctoral training is not a goal itself, it's clearly a first step in the developing and growing career. So the goal, the professional goal, is something they will achieve later. So it's one of the first steps to achieve it. And finally, the importance of defining the career plan, and on that aspect, you can have a role and you can help them to get the best out of the doctoral experience and all other experience, and create some opportunities in terms of skills development, network. So knowing what the goal and the idea of career development of your PhD candidate is, you can adapt and you can make specific advices. So you can put some person in contact specifically, and you can also help them to develop specific skills because they will need it for their future. Then this is also a question to select the next step before they get the job of their dreams. So sometimes a postdoc, for example, can be a very good second step, even for people who doesn't want to stay definitely in academia, because postdoc can be clearly an added value on international jobs, or because they can be the opportunity to develop specific technical or specific skills, highly valuable in company too. And finally, it's important to be convincing when they look for a job. So it's something that they have to meet you all along the PhD. It's not something to think about just 2 days before the defense. Okay, I think that was my message, and maybe Rebecca and Anis, you have something to add?
Already to thank you and to emphasize again on the fact that an accompaniment of your PhD candidates is really necessary for their future, for their professional future, in order to have a better career than what they would have without any help. So really do not hesitate to invite them to do trainings. Don't hesitate to help them by understanding actually what exactly they're doing, like not science-wise, but management-wise, working-wise, professional-wise. There are a lot of trainings that are undergoing right now. So again, you can always be the example and let them know exactly what they should learn, they should teach, in order to become the professional that we will be looking for in 5 or 10 years from now.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
So I guess with this, we are done with this presentation, and I hope the message actually that you got is positive, and you would know how to deal with your PhD candidates in a better way, and how to help them have a much better future. I give back the talk to Simon, and let us know what you think.
Well, thank you, Anis, Laurence, and Rebecca for this presentation about the careers of the PhD candidates, and what as supervisors we can do to help them in order to enhance their careers and their career possibilities. If you have questions, now is the time. Questions for the speakers regarding the advice they had for you, regarding the statistics, regarding whatever question you have actually right now. Just know that there is a delay between the moment we speak and the moment you hear us. So we are just going to wait a few seconds now to see if you have questions. If you have questions, of course you can't ask them orally, but you have the chat tool on the right of the video, to ask us questions. So please feel free to ask any questions that you have right now, and we'll answer that. We get positive feedback. I'm just telling that to Anis, Laurence, and Rebecca, because they can't see your text, but I can. So we get a few people saying thank you for the time and efforts and presentation. But yeah, if you have questions, you can also. We're glad to have positive feedback, of course. But if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I'm just going to wait a few more seconds to see if you do have questions. Otherwise, no, I don't see questions pop up. So I guess you were clear, Laurence, Anis, and Rebecca, apparently everybody understood. If you do have questions, but you dare not ask them on the chat live, of course, and as it was the case for the other webinars, feel free to send us a mail. You have here the mailing address for ad hoc talent management if you have questions for them, or you have our email that you can find again on any other webinar from this channel. So feel free to ask them. Oh yes, we do have the questions. Great. So I don't know who Sportsjack is, but the questions that you ask is most of this information appeared to be related to STEM PhDs, and Sportjack wonders if we have any differences between STEM and humanities PhDs, or if the work focuses solely on STEM areas. Anis, I guess you have an answer to that.
Yes, definitely. So I don't really see how this is oriented towards STEM STEM field, because actually the only aspect where STEM field actually would work, not with the STEM field, but actually the only place where the field actually would play a role is in the scientific and technical competencies. But as Rebecca showed at the beginning, if I can talk on behalf of you, Rebecca, just here, there are 30% of PhDs in France who go outside of R&D, and 37 in Canada who go outside of R&D. So you can guess that these people will go in sectors who will have jobs actually that are not related to research and development, which actually means that STEM or not STEM, it doesn't really matter. So you have all these people actually with working actually for these kind of sectors who will have to work on these competencies. On the other side, like research in academia, it's pretty clear. So I think I don't have to explain it much more, but you know that in academia, you have like a big separation between STEM and non-STEM. But R&D in private, if you do R&D, you have to have the technical and scientific skills. So basically, yes, in this case, you do have to work on the field and to have a specific knowledge. But on the other side, it's not really the case. When I showed just this presentation about the competencies, the only place where the field plays a role again is scientific expertise. Otherwise, for the rest, problem solving, self-reflection, problem expression, interpersonal skills, curiosity, autonomy, and rigor, all of these actually are and should be also applied by or acquired by PhDs, no matter actually what kind of PhD they are doing.
Just to clarify, Anis, can you confirm, because I think it's the case, can you confirm that the studies that you mentioned, they are not studies based on STEM PhDs, but on PhDs of all kind of disciplines? So the results that you showed, they are from PhDs from all kinds of disciplines.
Yes, definitely. So basically, when we gathered the data, we weighted them in order to match what is the national proportion of either in France or in Canada of PhDs in the different sectors. So basically, when we get these results, the results actually are applicable for all the fields. And Rebecca, maybe you want to add more information about that for your region.
Yes, for sure. So as Anis mentioned, all of the data that we've presented, whether it regards the employment outcomes or the competencies, we've collected data across disciplines. And yes, we find that what we collected is fairly representative of the population, at least in Canada. But wherever there are slight discrepancies, we do weight the data based on the Statistics Canada profiles.
And we do the same on the sources published by the Minister of Education and Research and Innovation of France.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answered your questions. Next question is from Chris Gibb, who asks, what sort of strategies would you suggest for PhD candidates who are reticent to develop a career plan? And then he asks another question, would you recommend working with candidates one-on-one or with a group of PhD candidates?
Okay, maybe I can answer it. First, when someone doesn't want to think about something, you can force him, okay? I think it's really important to have that kind of discussion at the beginning of when you enroll a new PhD, to discuss that the question of career can be discussed at different time, at different moment during the process. If they refuse it, okay, it's a pity, but it's okay. It's a proposal and something you can include in your management role with people open to do it. The second part of the question, one-to-one or in group, I would say both. Clearly, for me, you can have 1 or 2 meetings on that aspect with different candidates or different people in your lab to make complete feedback, because the feedback, for example, will help for the motivation, and then can be a moment where people can make the point on their progress, on the skills developed, etc. So people can help each other in this exercise, and probably a one-to-one, maybe yearly. It's a good rhythm to see if the goal change, what are the opportunity or the events or the training or the orientation you can adapt for each project one by one.
Thank you, Laurence. I would also maybe like to add something that could help if perhaps you're experiencing resistance from just saying like, I want to know what your career plan is. That seems kind of big, and perhaps it could be daunting, and maybe that could be a reason we experience some pushback. But another option is to maybe just ask for the first step. Just like a doctoral project is very long and daunting, we'll start with what's the first step, maybe what's the problem, what's the research question. But for here, it could be, just what are your motivations, and starting there, or, take a look at that, or maybe just like one aspect that we talked about that can get them started. And, after you do that 2 or 3 times, they might start to see like, oh, okay, this isn't that bad. I can keep moving on with this.
Yeah, good idea, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for those answers. The next question is from Natalie. She asks, is there a difference between PhDs who define their own research subject, which is quite common in Canada, but not in Europe? She says, well, actually, it's also common in some countries in Europe. So a difference between PhDs who define their own research subject and those who are included in a scientific proposal. Do you know if there are differences in the skills and careers, or do you have data about that or not?
On my side, not really. I cannot pronounce on that. I cannot say anything because I have literally never asked this question before. It might be extremely interesting to see how the outcome would be. So thank you for this question, but I'm really sorry that I cannot answer the French side anyway. Any information, Rebecca?
It's funny actually to have that question, because it's crossed my mind the last few weeks. Unfortunately, it's only something I could speculate on, and we don't have data that looks at it, but I would be interested to see that as well. I would hope that the core competencies that we find that are likely to be possessed by all PhDs, whether it's, as we mentioned, like discipline, or how long it's been since you defended, or we look at a number of different potential influencing factors, and we consistently find a pool that is not influenced by those things. So I would still anticipate to see a good number of the competencies that we talked about, but for sure, that would be something to look at in the future.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, Natalie, that we can't answer that more precisely. Okay, I see there are no more questions on the chat, so I hope we answered most of your questions and interrogations. I just have then to thank you all for your participation, for the questions that you asked, for watching us. I remind you that this webinar, you can watch it again on YouTube in a few hours. Just give some time to YouTube to transform the live into a video you can watch again, but you'll be able to watch it anytime you want. So feel free to come back and check the data and the answers and so on. The chat will also be available. So for the few things I answered directly in the chat, you will have the answers. Yeah, and so thank you again, Anis, Laurence, and Rebecca. And for everyone, have a nice weekend and take care of you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Nice weekend.
Bye.